Hello, my name is David Sim, and I'm creative director at Gehl from Copenhagen. We're here at Palma in Bratislava looking how we can create a neighborhood for the future. You know, I don't think I've ever worked on a site for an urban project with such good public transport connections. There's amazing potential here to create a new centre, like out of the centre. I really love the old Bratislava. It's one of the most beautiful town centres in Europe, and there's an amazing potential to create a new centre, authentic from more recent history, authentic from our time. I guess what's typical of industrial buildings, you don't really know what's going on inside. They're quite secretive, but there are some really amazing interiors in some of the old buildings. I guess what we have to do now, and it's our big challenge, is to find out, can any of these buildings be saved? Can we work with them in a way, can we find new uses to bring life into these old buildings? But also to create a centre which is relevant for the immediate neighbours. And there's some really great neighbours around here. On Račianskej Street, we've got students, we've got makers, we've got a community just over the railway, and this could become a new centre for them. So the first thing, we're not just thinking about making development, we're thinking about creating a new neighbourhood, a new urban quarter. And as an urban quarter, that can contain many things. It'll be a place both to live, to work, but also be a place to go and do your everyday errands, but also a place you could go to on the weekend and go to an event. And from that point of view, the public spaces will be important too. And this is important for the neighbours, because not everybody's going to work here, not everybody's going to live here, but many, many people will be invited to come in and visit this place. So the streets, the squares, the green spaces will be very important. And I think that at the heart of this project will be high quality public space that's really inviting and attractive, not just for the people who live and work here, but the people in the surroundings, and they'll want to come here and feel it's their town centre. What I wanted to talk about today was this softer approach. So hello Bratislava, I'm sorry I can be there. One of the best town centres in Europe. You are in an amazing situation at the crossroads between East and West and North and South. Of course, for architecture, urbanism, design, you're at an exciting place. And also I'm excited because, you know, I'm a Scotsman, so I recognize as an old country and a young nation, so much going on. And of course, so much going on in terms of makers and creative people working, doing interesting things. I'm just so glad to be part of that. I want to talk about not only a project that we've been working on, but I'm going to cheat in the next 37 minutes. The first 17 and a half minutes is going to be actually a lecture about some theory about urbanism, how we make good places. And in the second half, I'll talk about the project we've worked on. So what is the DNA of Bratislava? What is the urban components that make it work? And I think we have to ask ourselves, in the new developments, the new places that are springing up around Bratislava, do they have that DNA, that feeling of the uniqueness of only being one place in the heart of Europe? So what is this softer approach? This is a picture from Malmö in Sweden, and it's just showing that if you get things right, people might even dance tango in a public space. Who would imagine the Swedish people dancing tango? So reserved they are. But this is a former industrial site. It's a brownfield site. And if we look down, we can see this looks very different from the usual places. We see courtyards and small defined spaces. The buildings are much closer together than usually you would find in a new area. And we find that the spaces between the buildings are also smaller. They have the human scale. They work at eye level. So when you walk around with open windows or open doors, this is the scale for meeting your neighbors. And this human scale translates into other things too. It translates into trust. This is the scale that lets your children go out and sell coffee and juice to strangers. This is the scale that invites you to go outside. So eating out on a Tuesday night is going out into the public spaces with your pizza and your family. And it's the scale that lets you leave the door open because the cat has to go in and out. And it's a bit like living in a village rather than living in the middle of a big city. And in this way, we can see that neighborhood is not just a place, it's a state of mind. And when we build, we have these opportunities to connect to other people, to connect to the place, and connect to the forces of nature, to the planet. And taking care of the small scale between inside and outside, what's at eye level, allows us to connect. And this is what makes these places work. So Malmö is much more than just a neighborhood with some houses, some offices. It's a diverse, dynamic piece of city. And I guess that making cities what we're about at Gehl. We work all over the world, but our base for our work, there's a kind of foundation, intellectual foundation for our work, is based on the work of Jan Gehl, now 85 years old. He's called the Robin Hood of planning, or the Robin Hood of architecture. Jan Gehl's story is about working in a interdisciplinary way. He married an environmental psychologist, and they were very critical of modernism. The scale of buildings, the open spaces, the height of buildings. They found out that children couldn't find their way home from school because everything looked the same. They found that the children who lived above the 4th story didn't go out to play and had less friends. So they recognized there were many failings in the modern architecture. The bright light buildings, the tall buildings, the open spaces didn't work. And therefore, we created a whole new field of research and a field of knowledge, which we've used all over the world to make places better. Not just Copenhagen, which has gone from being a car city to a people city, but also places like New York, and going in with paint to create good public spaces, which allow people to live as if they were in Europe, as if they were in Copenhagen. And that same human scale, human approach, after the huge earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand in 2011, making a master plan which could allow us to rebuild at the human scale. And I guess this is what I would call this is the scale of the soft city. What is the soft city? Well, it's something about a scale which promotes the intensity of life. And you have that when I walk around in old Bratislava, that intensity of life is there. Oh, what makes that work? And it's something about the combination of density with diversity. And when you put those things two together, you get proximity. Density alone is not enough. We need this diversity to make an interesting place. And density can be delivered in many, many different ways. These are pictures of the same density. They're all the same. So the tall buildings, just building tall doesn't necessarily mean it gets more dense. But we know that only one of these has the scale of being a human being. And that's the scale that we're very interested in. Because we can build these similar buildings with the same spaces, but what we need is a diversity of space. The difference between front and back, between public and private, this richness allows so much more to happen. And this proximity can happen. And why is that important? Well, if we've learned anything from the pandemic, is that living locally, the ability to do as much as possible in your neighborhood is vital. So what are the aspects which allow us to live locally? Now, everybody's talking about the 15-minute city, but I would say we have a 30-second city. We've got a 1 minute, a 3-minute city. And it's about the closeness between how long does it take you to go from your bedroom down to the bakery to buy bread, to go from the street into the courtyard? How long does it take for your kids to go out to play into a safe place? And it's those seconds and minutes that make up the proximity of the city. And you can find these qualities of the city in old Bratislava, these qualities of the definition of space and the diversity of buildings and the variety of architecture. A few things we'd like to just highlight would be the value of enclosure, courtyards, what the courtyard means as a defined space, which becomes very, very useful when you live in the city, because it's a quiet, protected space, acoustics from the noise and the smells of traffic. Is a quiet space which allows you to sleep with an open window. It's a protected microclimate, which makes it a bit cooler in the summer, a bit warmer in the winter, so you don't need to have air conditioning. It's a safe place for your kids to go out and play. So you can be standing, making the dinner in the kitchen, and you can see, along with 100 other parents, the kids playing safely, protected from traffic. Now in Scandinavia, we're using the courtyard as the standard form of building. because it delivers density and diversity and so many advantages, possibly most importantly, the common space and identity that you get for a public space, that you get in that shared space. And so it does so much. The next thing is the value of layering, just not rather than stacking a building like pancakes, making the difference in layering. The ground floor is different from the middle, is different from the top, and making buildings which make the most of the ground floor. And we've discovered that we can do so much more, activating the ground floor, and even for residential, we can make so much more happen. And we can get an increase of 25% in value for the ground floor if we take care of the edge zones, which connect people between inside and outside. And of course, if we build in this lower scale of 4, 5, 6, 7 stories, we've got much more penthouse, so more people can live with the sky. And so you've got this amazing connection with the surroundings. And we've got these kind of layered buildings, which really make the most of their urban location. Soft mobility, the minutes, the seconds to move around the city, and connecting the places, our apartment with the bus stop, the directness of going in and out, 5 seconds to go inside a building, 15 seconds to go from the street to the courtyard, maybe 45 seconds to go from your apartment down to the street. A scale which connects you from your home, from your office to the outside, and making walkability possible. This is Copenhagen, where the pavement, the sidewalk continues across the side street, where cycling could be forever, even granny and grandpa can cycle, children can cycle safely. And of course, they're connected in a kind of ecosystem of city life because they're stopping at the shops, they're interconnecting with other people, everybody at eye level. And of course, this thing about transportation, having a beer or a coffee while you wait for the bus, this connectivity with street level mobility, trams and buses. And of course, as you move through the city at eye level, you see so much more. You connect with people, you connect with place, you connect with the weather, you see the leaves and the trees, you see the sky, the weather. And so we shouldn't be talking about TOD, transit-oriented development. We should be thinking about neighborhood-oriented transport, everything that happens at eye level that connects you, your apartment, your workspace with your surroundings. And Helsinki, the most livable city in the world. This could be Bratislava. It's got all the same components if you work with those components. And finally, the last bit of theory, being connected to the environment, just recognizing that there are so many things we can do to connect inside to outside. By making the right kind of forms, we can build our own weather. We can make it cooler, we can make it warmer with form. We can protect from the wind to make a place warmer in the summer. We can create shade and have shade in the summer. So we need less heating, less air conditioning. We can learn from those old environments and have a scale which allows us to create our own microclimate. And small details, shades and shutters can allow us to adapt and live well using simple technologies. And all the spaces, those little edges of the building, the balconies, the loggias and the terraces, which connect inside and outside and allow us, even although we're in the city, to be connected to nature. And finally, just recognizing in times of climate change, the lessons from Copenhagen, where the cloudbursts, the extreme rain, rather than putting everything underground and overloading the sewer system or the rainwater system, we can make floodable public space. We can make public spaces which can absorb the extreme climate. This is the climate quarter in Copenhagen. And of course, it's become a more lovely place because it's greener, it's cooler, but it also performs better in the rain. And you can put all of this together, all of this theory about the physical structure, about mobility, about living with the weather, we can put it together and we can create density, diversity, and delight. And those things together kind of maybe help us find, because I see this pattern of little villas and these very high towers, but there's this other scale. You might call it the missing middle, but this is the classic European tool for building city. And this is what we have to rediscover. All over the world, we're seeing this scale rediscovered, new interpretations of simple technologies, of a human scale, of a diverse building stock, which makes pieces of city that people want to live in. And so that's my kind of theoretical base. We can urbanize at a human scale. That was a very long introduction for a project I'd like to talk about, because what does all of this mean for Bratislava? what does this idea of the soft mean? Can we build soft in Bratislava? Well, we at Gehl, we've been working with Corwin for the last couple of years at Palma, a former industrial site in the north of Bratislava, a site close to the town centre, the old town centre. You can see it on the plan here. And also you can see it's a site which is extremely well served by public transport. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever worked on a site which was so well connected with public transport, with tram, with rail, is quite exceptional. And of course, it's brownfield. This is exactly the kind of site we should be working on. Just like Palme, it's a brownfield site where we're using the existing infrastructure, we're using used land for denser, more diverse use. There's an amazing heritage on the site. And I think that's something we don't talk about. Everybody knows the heritage of old Bratislava, but we don't talk about the heritage of the 20th century, of industrial buildings. And there are some real gems on this site. And I think it's important that as we started this project, we were aware of the amazing opportunity of these buildings inside and outside, the architectural archaeology, the industrial archaeology, as we study these places and how we can integrate this amazing history, the history of more recent times, into our project. And these are just some shots of some of the inside of the building, some that influenced us when we started our work at Palma. The great thing about Palma, having really, really good neighbors. We've got a great variety of population around us. We've got residential districts around us. We've got the university. We've got Nova Černova, which is with its makers and creative people. We've got landscape around us, great neighbors. So can we build this soft city in Slovakia? And you can tell I'm very optimistic. And I can tell you, we brought our experience from Copenhagen, from Scandinavia, from Malmö, and we found it was very hard because this traditional pattern of building requires a bigger footprint. It requires bigger surfaces because it's about enclosing space. And generally there's less green area. So a big challenge was because in the Slovak regulations, all of the Slovak building regulations are designed for modernism. They're designed for standalone buildings in a big open landscape. And that's the structure which we know doesn't work so well. So we had the challenge of 35% maximum footprint. And this was the assumption that there should be taller buildings and larger spaces. There was an assumption of this green area of 25%. There was this challenge of a 30-degree angle between the buildings. And this makes it impossible to build anything, dense and closed. The center of Bratislava is totally illegal. So we think that's wonderful. We can't build it today. And also we had the challenge of really quite extreme parking requirements. So although we're hoping today that we're going to work with assumptions about soft mobility and public transport, we really had to consider the traditional way, the 20th century way of lots of parking. Of course, there were great potentials too. There was a potential 50 to 70% residential, so the idea we could have mixed use. And of course, that big green area allowed us to think about stormwater presence, about urban cooling through planting. So there were opportunities too with the regulations. So let me tell you about the story, how we went about it, from analysis to concept. This is the site from above. You can see this exciting industrial site, 60,000 square meters. And I'll do my little sketch. This is my kind of hand sketch. So what's very special is you've got this bend in the road, the bend in Račianskej, the boulevard. This was our placemaking. We've got the tram stop at Račianskej, great address. So we've got this bend in the road in Račianskej. And from that, we've also got the noisy side to the east. And we've got a rail bank to south. So we've kind of got an island. So we've got to really work. We've got to look north. We've got to look east if we want to connect. So we've got this great neighbor, of course, to the north of Nova Černova. We'll make the most of that. So let's really speak to that. And then, of course, we've got these existing buildings we really want to celebrate. So we want to keep as many as possible of those existing buildings. So we're including them in the plan. And we also want to think about how you see them. So all those arrows are about how you recognize those buildings. We have to make the site accessible. and we have to work with existing traffic. So we work with existing access points. But importantly, we want to reduce the impact of traffic. So we bring traffic around the back of the site, so the car traffic won't dominate the site. And then we have a very light network in between, which would be much more pedestrian. And then there's an idea that would start in the north, where we've got the tram stop, we've got the good neighbors, Nova Tronova, and then we kind of phased the development as we go for going south. Another idea is to concentrate the activity in the north of the site at the tram stop where the busy stuff is, and have a quieter to the south. And this is the idea of a Kickstarter. Can we start the project straight away? It's a big project, but can we build this little first fragment of city, beginning talking to the neighbors, speaking to Račianska, making the most of the tram stop. And then after that, we can build south and fill up the site from north to south. And then all the time connecting to the neighbors, to the north, to the east, but also to the south, and of course with a bridge over the railway tracks to the east. And in this way, we can imagine a piece of city, a real piece of city connected with its surroundings. So now let's dive in a little bit deeper and understand it a little better. If we want to make a lively place, if we want to make a living place, we have to really think, who's going to come? We have our residents, we have locals, we'll have visitors, the neighbors, people who live in the surroundings, people that come to visit. And we have to offer something for everyone, from the residents and workers to the visitors, to the neighbors, something for everyone. And also thinking throughout the day, so we can have as much life. There's life in the morning, in the evening, middle of the day, lunchtime. How can we make this a vibrant place throughout the day? And we do this working very actively, speaking to the surroundings, looking at those connections. Our red lines, those are the busiest places, and these loops of activity connecting with the surroundings. So we really speak to the neighbors, we interconnect. And the red is this brighter all day kind of stuff, inviting people in on the day and the weekend. And thinking of the streets as public spaces, because they're all, we can make the most of those. You can see the blue, we're going to be much calmer. We're trying to, the dark color around the edge, that's the traffic. So the traffic's on the edge of the site, and then gets lighter on the inside, minimal traffic on the inside, to encourage people to use the street, not just for driving, but as a place to walk and spend time. The streets as public spaces. And in a similar way, we can think about this soft landscape. It's a green site, maximizing the green, the courtyards and the public spaces, making green spaces. And also, like Copenhagen, blue spaces too, considering the water, the runoff, taking care of that locally, so that can be part of the big concept of what we're trying to do. And we need diversity. People are different. We need different kinds of spaces. We need some kind of like, wow, kind of spaces, really fantastic. The whole city can come and have a party. We've got some kind of cool, exciting spaces, but we also have calm spaces. We have places which are along like, a calm space, where you can open your door, let your kids run out and play. And there are even places which are, so you can sleep with an open window. So this variety of spaces, we have these different kinds of spaces for the different needs of everyday life. It's busier in the north, it's quieter in the south. The courtyards, because they're protected, they can create that calm. And of course, as I said, we've got these amazing, amazing existing buildings. Each of them offers a huge opportunity to do something special. However, it has to be said that they're a wonderful opportunity, but nobody thanks you for working with an old building, because the old buildings, of course, they're quite inefficient. You can't squeeze parking underneath them, so they make the site much more difficult. And I think it's a challenge when we deal with the architecture of the 20th century. I mean, if we were doing a project in the center of Bratislava, there'd be so many allowances made. But we have to start thinking how we can be more tolerant and more generous with projects which use these existing buildings. And of course, we want to maximize their visual presence to make identity. And this idea is that the ground floor, at least, should always be public to make them really part of the heritage of the site. And then remembering that we can deliver density in different ways, I said from part one. How do we want to build? We want to go from taller to lower. We want to make lower buildings. We also want to go from the stacked to layered buildings. We want to have these layers. And we also want to go from the standalone buildings to enclosure, to make defined streets, defined squares, courtyards, and protected spaces. So those are our principles. And with those principles of lower, layered, and enclosed, we can think about the edge being very important to make active spaces. And we can have this distribution of the massing. So it becomes like a piece of city with this variety of spaces and scales. And how can we be sustainable? Well, we can reuse the buildings. We can reuse the materials. We can recycle the waste. We can also recycle the water. And we can, in the new buildings, we can use more sustainable materials like timber. That's the circular approach. We can also be sustainable by being healthy, making it walkable, making it possible to spend more time outdoors. We can have local food production, use daylight. Natural daylight is one of the most important things for physical health. So we make it a healthy place. And we can also make it sustainable, climate friendly by having a whole range of technologies, using the public transport infrastructure, that we can be climate friendly in that way too. Natural ventilation, natural light. Goes without saying. And finally, last part is how to make a truly soft place is we start with life and spaces. So here we are stepping inside from Račianskej, looking into the site. And we can see from the tram stop, looking in some of the mixture of old and new buildings. And we have a range of spaces, like I said, the wow, the ah, and the shh. We have this range of spaces, the busiest ones to Račianskej, and it gets calmer as you go towards the east and towards the south. Starting with Račianskej, we wanted to really imagine this in the future as a boulevard. This is the existing section. And what was important when we rebuilt it, we wanted to be generous to the city. So we've actually stepped back. So we've given some of the site to the city so that there's more space for cars. So there's better capacity for cars and for expanding the tram stop in the future, but also stepping back to create a green zone toward Račianskej. So we're stepping back from Račianskej to get more space to speak to the city. To the north, as we meet Novochernovka, we've got making the most of that open space, so respecting that space as well. The enclosed space in the north, in our kind of busy working zone, we can contain the nightlife. And then we have lots of green spaces around the site, a scale. And this is just a little section through one of the main green spaces. You can see the scale, the size in relation to the height of the buildings, the soft edges, and this idea that we can have this very lush green space, making it very nice to live, both for visitors as well as, of course, for the residents, a place for children to play in this former industrial site. We've also got this places to hang out. So our streets, we talked about streets as public spaces, so green streets to hang out. So we've got in that street space here in the middle of the site, we've got a lot of greenery and unusable space. So this as we looking towards the silo, you can see this hangout space, a lot of space for people to use. And then finally, as we go towards the silo, that big, hard public space, this heart of Palma, the big event space, maybe something like Bryant Park in New York, a multi-use space where you can do lots of different activities. Something like this, a space, a big, generous space with a diversity of architecture and other activities going on, a place where you could invite the whole city to come and play. Our idea is to have a Kickstarter. We want to start the project as soon as possible with beautiful new workspaces, well connected to the tram stop, creating those courtyards as the first step that this way of creating a piece of city is possible, integrating some of the old buildings, including that locksmith's building. So we've got already the reuse of the old buildings, courtyards, and it's that first fragment of city. And from that, we hope we can build a piece of city, a new neighborhood in Bratislava, something with a human scale, but at the same time, totally of our time, diverse and dense at the same time. So could be something like this. I'm looking forward to the next chapter. This is from our concept design, seeing it grow, seeing the architecture developed, and seeing this new neighborhood grow in Bratislava. And I'm looking forward to my next visits. So thank you very much.